I spent 30 years trying to keep flowers alive. 30 years of watering, feeding, pruning, and worrying. And the flowers I fussed over the most were always the first ones to die. That's the confession nobody wants to make. We buy the prettiest plant at the nursery, bring it home, give it our best soil, our best spot, our most careful attention. And it struggles. Meanwhile, there's a plant in the neglected corner of the yard, the one we forgot about entirely, and it's blooming like it's auditioning for a magazine cover. I'm 74 years old. I've been gardening for over 50 years, and the single most important lesson I've learned is this. The best gardens aren't built on care. They're built on choosing the right plants. Plants that don't need you? That sounds harsh, but it's true. I'm going to share 8 plants with you today that my neighbors constantly ask me about. They think I have some secret. They think I'm out there every morning with a watering can and a bag of fertilizer. I'm not. Some of these plants haven't been watered in years. The plant at number 1 hasn't received a single drop of supplemental water in over 7 years. And it looks better than most flowers that get pampered daily. But before we get into the list, I need to tell you something that changes everything about how you think about plant care. Most of the advice you've been given about keeping plants healthy is actually making them weaker. I'll explain exactly what I mean as we go through each plant. Let's start. Number 8, blanket flower. Every gardening book tells you to prepare your soil before planting. Add compost, mix in fertilizer. Make the soil rich and dark and full of nutrients. I did this for decades. It's what good gardeners do, right? Wrong. At least for blanket flower. I planted blanket flowers in 2 spots one spring. The first group went into my best garden bed. Dark, rich soil amended with compost every year. The second group went into a terrible spot near my driveway. Clay and gravel. The kind of soil you'd apologize for if someone saw it. The ones in the good soil grew tall, lush, green leaves, beautiful foliage. Almost no flowers. The ones in the gravel, covered in blooms from June through November. 5 months of flowers that look like tiny sunsets. Red centers bleeding into golden yellow edges. They bloomed so heavily I could barely see the leaves underneath. That was the moment I started questioning everything I thought I knew about plant care. Blanket flower, the variety called Arizona Sun, actually punishes you for treating it well. Rich soil makes it lazy. It grows foliage instead of flowers. But plant it in poor, lean, even terrible soil, and it blooms its heart out trying to reproduce before it runs out of resources. Here's the hidden trick nobody mentions. Don't deadhead blanket flowers either. I know, every gardening guide says to deadhead everything. But blanket flower produces so many blooms so quickly that by the time you finish deadheading one side of the plant, the other side has already opened new flowers. Just leave them alone. They handle 95-degree heat without flinching. Deer walk right past them. Rabbits ignore them completely. And after the first summer of weekly watering to establish roots, you can forget they exist. They'll reward your neglect with 5 months of non-stop color. Number 7, purple coneflower. I deadheaded my purple coneflowers religiously for 10 years. Every Saturday morning I'd go out with my clippers and snip off every spent bloom. I thought I was doing them a favor. I thought I was encouraging more flowers. I was wrong. And I was also robbing the birds. Here's what happened. One summer, I hurt my back and couldn't garden for 6 weeks. When I finally got back out there, my purple coneflowers looked incredible. They were covered in flowers at various stages, fresh blooms next to fading ones next to dried seed heads, and goldfinches were everywhere, little yellow birds clinging to the dried seed heads, pulling out seeds and eating them right there on the stems. I'd never seen goldfinches in my garden before. 10 years of obsessive deadheading meant I'd been removing their winter food source every single week. The variety Magnus is what you want. Flowers 4 to 5 inches across with purple petals that arch downward around a spiky orange cone. That cone is the goldfinch buffet. Leave it alone. Purple cone flowers bloom from June through October, 5 months. They're native North American wildflowers that evolved to handle whatever this continent throws at them. Heat, cold, humidity, drought. The only thing they can't handle is soggy soil. But here's the part that surprises most people. Coneflowers get dramatically better with age. Year 1 is modest. Don't judge them. Year 3 gets impressive. By year 5, you've got plants 3 feet across covered in hundreds of flowers. I have coneflowers that have been in the same spot for over 12 years. They've never been fertilized. They get no supplemental water. They've never had a pest problem. And they bloom for 5 months every single year without me lifting a finger. The only effort required? None. Literally zero ongoing maintenance once they're established. Leave the seed heads for the birds in winter. In spring, clear away last year's dead stems and walk away. The plant handles everything else. Number 6. Catmint. I planted catmint along my front walkway 12 years ago. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made in the garden. And not just because of the flowers. The variety Walker's Low forms soft mounds about 2 feet tall and 3 feet wide. Starting in late April, those mounds erupt in spikes of lavender blue flowers. The color is somewhere between blue and purple, and from a distance, the entire plant looks like a blue cloud hovering above the ground. Now here's the one piece of maintenance catmint needs, and I'll be honest about it. In mid-July, grab your head shears and cut the entire plant back by half. 5 minutes of work. That's not zero care, I know. But consider what you get in return. Within 2 weeks, fresh growth pushes up. New flower spikes appear, and the plant blooms again all the way until frost. Late April through October, 6 full months from one 5-minute haircut. But here's the detail that makes catmint worth growing even if it never flowered. The foliage smells incredible. Every time I walk to my front door, I brush against the catmint and the air fills with this clean, minty fragrance. Guests comment on it constantly. It smells like an expensive garden before they even see the flowers. That scent does something else too. It repels pests. I planted catmint next to my roses, and the roses get noticeably fewer aphids. The aromatic oils in catmint leaves naturally discourage many common garden insects, so this plant that requires almost no care is actually caring for the plants around it. Once established, catmint is absurdly drought-tolerant. I have plants that receive nothing but rainfall, no supplemental watering for 5 consecutive years. And they bloom beautifully every season. Bees love it so much that on a warm afternoon, you can hear the humming from 20 feet away. Number 5. Coreopsis. I need to tell you about the day I stopped trusting plant labels. I bought a flat of Coreopsis and planted half in my vegetable garden where the soil is rich, dark, and heavily amended with compost. The other half went into a sandy, lean patch on the side of the house where nothing else wanted to grow. The vegetable garden Coreopsis grew thick, dark green foliage, looked incredibly healthy, produced almost no flowers. The ones in sandy, nutrient-poor soil, hundreds of golden yellow flowers on each plant. So many blooms covering the foliage that the plants looked like golden mounds from across the yard. This was the second time a plant taught me that good soil can be a curse. Threadleaf Coreopsis, particularly the varieties Moonbeam and Zagreb, bloom from June through October, 5 months. Each individual flower is small, about an inch across, but the plants produce so many simultaneously that it doesn't matter. We're talking hundreds of flowers at once on a single plant. And here's what makes Coreopsis perfect for the neglectful gardener. Because so many flowers are blooming at once, individual flowers fading goes completely unnoticed. There's no need to deadhead, no need to clean up. The overall display stays consistent for 5 straight months, regardless of whether you ever touch the plant. The one thing to know: after about 5 years, Coreopsis plants can start dying out in the center. When you notice this happening, dig the plant up in spring, divide it, throw away the dead center, and replant the healthy outer sections. This gives you multiple new plants for free and completely rejuvenates the original. It's about 15 minutes of work once every 5 years. Between those divisions, zero maintenance. No water, no fertilizer, no pruning, no deadheading. Just 5 months of golden flowers every year. Number 4. Hardy verbena. I ignored this plant for years. In the nursery pot, it looked like nothing. A few thin stems with tiny flowers. It seemed delicate and fussy, exactly the kind of plant I'd learned to avoid. Then a gardening friend divided one of hers and gave me a chunk. I didn't have a good spot for it, so I planted it in a terrible location between my stepping stones, mostly just to be polite. I figured it would die within a month. That was 9 years ago. It's still there. It's bloomed every year from May through November. 7 months, and I have never, not once, done a single thing to care for it beyond that initial planting. Hardy verbena, specifically the variety Homestead Purple, grows only 6 to 8 inches tall, but spreads 2 to 3 feet wide. It creates a carpet of deep purple flowers so dense that it completely covers the ground. I can walk on it without damaging it. It grows between my stepping stones and spills over the edges in a way that makes the path look like something from an English garden magazine. The trailing stems root wherever they touch soil, which means the plant slowly fills in any bare spot on its own. You don't need to buy more plants. You don't need to propagate it. Just let it do its thing and it will cover whatever ground you give it. And here's the detail that genuinely sets verbena apart. Most perennials take a break in the brutal heat of July and August. They stop blooming, look tired, and wait for cooler weather to resume. Verbena doesn't care. It blooms straight through the hottest weeks of summer without slowing down. Late into fall, when butterflies are desperately searching for nectar before winter, verbena is still producing flowers. I've counted 5 different butterfly species on a single plant in September. It's one of the last reliable nectar sources in the garden, and the butterflies know it. Number 3. Salvia. I planted May-night salvia 15 years ago. I've divided those original plants 3 times since then, creating dozens of new plants that I've spread throughout every bed in my garden. In 15 years, they've never had a disease, never had insect damage, never failed to bloom, not once. That's a remarkable track record for any living thing. May-night salvia produces deep purple-blue flower spikes from May through October. 6 months. The plants form tidy clumps about 18 inches tall and 2 feet wide. The flower spikes stand upright above aromatic foliage that deer and rabbits completely ignore. In my garden, where deer eat almost everything, salvia stands untouched while hostas and daylilies around it get devastated. Now, salvia does benefit from one maintenance step. After the first big flush of bloom in late June, trim the spent flower spikes back to the top of the foliage. This takes maybe 10 minutes for a dozen plants. In return, you get a complete second round of flowering in August and September that's almost as heavy as the first. If you skip this trim, bloom declines noticeably in late summer. So I won't pretend this is a zero-effort plant. It's a 10 minutes once per season plant. But for 6 months of hummingbird-attracting flowers with 0 pest problems and 0 disease issues, 10 minutes seems like a reasonable trade. Here's what nobody tells you about salvia. Hummingbirds don't just visit it. They become possessive of it. I've watched individual hummingbirds guard a salvia plant for hours, chasing away any other hummingbird that approaches. They'll work every single flower on the plant, hovering at each tiny bloom for a sip before moving to the next. If you want hummingbirds in your yard, salvia is the most reliable attractant I've found in 50 years. Number 2, catmint already showed you what aromatic foliage can do, but this next plant takes drought tolerance to an extreme I didn't think was possible. Autumn joy sedum. This is a succulent, and I know what you're thinking. Succulents are those little things people keep on windowsills. Not this one. Autumn joy sedum grows 2 feet tall and 2 feet wide. It's a proper garden plant that holds its own next to anything. The thick, fleshy leaves store water internally, which is why this plant laughs at drought. I have sedum growing in a bed against my south-facing wall. Full sun, reflected heat off the siding. In summer, that spot regularly reaches temperatures that would kill most garden plants. My sedum thrives there. It has thrived there for 14 years without supplemental watering. Let me say that again. 14 years, no watering. In the hottest, driest spot in my entire property. In spring, blue-green succulent foliage emerges and forms a neat dome. Through summer, the plant builds large, flat-topped flower clusters at the tips of each stem. Starting in August, those clusters open into flowers that begin as pale pink, deepen to rose, then eventually turn to a rich brick red by October. The color transformation alone is worth growing this plant, but it doesn't stop there. Even after the flowers finish, the dried seed heads hold their shape through winter, catching snow and creating sculptural interest in the garden when everything else is bare. I leave the dried stems standing all winter precisely because they look beautiful, covered in frost. The maintenance for autumn joy sedum is as close to zero as gardening gets. In early spring, before new growth starts, cut last year's dried stems to the ground. That's it, one cleanup per year. No watering, no fertilizing, no deadheading, no pest treatment, no disease management. In 14 years, I have not encountered a single problem with this plant, not one. Butterflies cover the flower clusters in September and October. Bees work the blooms throughout August. It's a pollinator haven during the months when food sources start disappearing. Number 1, after 51 years of gardening, thousands of plants tried, hundreds of varieties tested, this is the plant that shocked me. Russian sage. I know what you're thinking. Russian sage seems too common to be number 1. Every garden center sells it. But here's what makes it extraordinary, and it's something most gardeners never realize because they don't leave plants alone long enough to discover it. Russian sage blooms from July through October. 4 months of lavender blue flowers held above silvery gray foliage. The plants grow 3 to 4 feet tall and equally wide, creating a massive presence that fills space in the garden like few other perennials can. But the bloom period isn't what earned it the top spot. This is what did. I planted Russian sage 13 years ago in a hellish spot where nothing else would survive. Full blazing sun against a south-facing wall. Soil that was mostly construction rubble and clay. No irrigation, no amendments, no compost, no fertilizer. I planted it and walked away. 13 years later, it has never been watered. Not once in 13 years. It has never been fertilized. It has never had a single pest. Never had a disease. It has bloomed spectacularly for 4 months every single year without fail. When I tell people this, they don't believe me. They come to see it, and they still barely believe me. The foliage is silvery and aromatic. Crush a leaf and it smells sharp, herbal, almost medicinal. That scent is the reason deer won't touch it. Rabbits avoid it, and most garden pests stay away. The aromatic oils that produce that fragrance are nature's pest repellent. Bees lose their minds over Russian sage. From July through October, the plants vibrate with bee activity. Butterflies visit constantly, especially in September and October when other nectar sources are vanishing. Here's the one maintenance requirement, and it's important. In late winter or early spring, before new growth appears, cut Russian sage back hard. I cut mine to about 6 inches above the ground. It looks brutal. Visitors wince when they see me do it. But it's necessary. If you don't cut it back, the old stems become woody, and new growth is sparse and weak. That hard cutback forces vigorous new growth from the base, and you get a full, dense plant loaded with flowers. That one annual cutback, Taking about 10 minutes for 3 large plants is the only care Russian sage has received in 13 years. No watering, no feeding, no spraying, no fussing. In the worst spot in my yard, where I'd given up trying to grow anything beautiful, Russian sage didn't just survive, it became the centerpiece. When gardening friends visit, Russian sage is the plant they ask about most. Not because it's exotic or unusual, but because it looks impossibly healthy for a plant that receives zero care. They assume I'm hiding some secret maintenance routine. I'm not. The secret is simply choosing a plant that doesn't need you. That's the real lesson from all 8 of these plants. After 50 years, my garden has never looked better, and I've never worked less. The shift happened when I stopped trying to keep demanding plants alive and started choosing plants that thrive on neglect. Your best garden isn't the one you work hardest on. It's the one you stock with plants that do the work for you. Plant these 8. Water them the first summer, then step back and watch them outperform every high-maintenance plant you've ever grown. I wish someone had told me this 40 years ago. It would have saved my back, saved my weekends, and given me decades more beauty with a fraction of the effort. Now you know. Don't wait 40 years like I did.